Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go.
How long does it take you to write a paper? Can you answer that question? How about if you're a book writer, how long does it take you to write a book chapter? When you're thinking about writing an article, how long does it take you to write the lit review? How about the discussion section? These are questions that we ask ourselves all the time in our Navigate program because we're trying to actually figure out the answer. So my clients are trying to write and publish more. And part of that process and part of the process that I teach inside of our Navigate program is about being able to estimate time to task. Okay. So in today's podcast episode, I'm going to give you some ideas about how to do this, some new ways of thinking about it, which I've been noodling on and developing, and I'm excited to share with you today on the podcast. So get ready. Today, we are talking about deciding time to task. My name's Kathy Mazak. I'm your host on the Academic Writing Amplified podcast and founder of Scholar's Voice, a professional development program company for women and non-binary professors who want to write and publish to the level in line with their expertise. So if that's you, or if you want that to be you, then keep listening. Very excited to have you here today. Before I go on, I just want to remind you that we are running a summer session of our Navigate 12-week program, which we always run it in the summer. It starts in mid-May, runs until the end of July, 12 weeks long. And you can get on the wait list now to find out everything you need to know about the program. Okay, so go ahead and go to scholarsvoice.org/navigate. You'll find a big pink button on the top where you can press that. It says wait list, join the wait list. Go ahead and get on the wait list so that you'll be the first to know when enrollment opens for our summer session of Navigate. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about deciding time to task. All right, so I'm going to give you some writing for academic publication basics. Okay, so here are two things that are non-negotiable when you are trying to project manage your writing. Thing number one is a list of tasks. Okay, so imagine you need to write an article. Having a task list for that article is essential, and I'll describe what that might look like in a second. And the other non-negotiable thing for writing project management, I should say academic writing project management, is time blocked on your calendar. If you only have time blocked, but you don't have a task list, you are likely to piddle away your times, do a lot of staring at I said scaring, right? Because I was going to say blinking cursor, and the blinking cursor is scary. So, staring at the blank screen, reorganizing your desk, like that kind of thing. Like if you don't have a good direction, if you don't have a task list for what you're going to work on during your writing block, it's not going to work. Similarly, if you have a task list, but you don't have dates and times set on your calendar, and you are able to hold those with the boundaries that they deserve, then you also can't move your writing forward because you're always trying to work your writing in at the edges of your time. And writing is one of them. The most important things we do as academics, it needs to have a central place in your time, in your week. So those two things are essential for academic writing project management: a task list and time blocked on your calendar. Now, a task list. Such a short phrase, so fraught. This is something that is really hard, or maybe, I don't know if it's that hard, actually. I think I hope to make it simpler, but it feels very hard to many of the clients in our program because they ask very logical questions like, well, but how big should a task be? Like, what is the level of granularity that I need to think about when I'm breaking projects into tasks? What counts as a task? How big is it? In other words, like, that's a thing. And then the other part of it is that over and over again, as we have tried to break a project into tasks and then execute on the tasks, many of us, me included, 1,000%, have had the experience of thinking that something will take us X amount of time and it takes X times 3 amount of time. So when that happens, we lose confidence in ourselves and our ability to project manage our writing because we think, well, this took me much longer than I thought, which can lead to judgmental thoughts like, I must be slow. I'm slower than everybody else. I'll never finish this. It's going to take too long. I really need to get these publications out. When is it going to happen? We go down the negative thought spiral. So today I really want to focus in on that estimating time to task part of writing project management, because it is so, like I said, it's so fraught. It can lead us to a negative relationship with our writing, which is very obviously, I talk a lot on this podcast about creating a positive relationship with your writing. It's really not helpful to feel confused or at sea or anything about estimating time to task. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've learned to estimate time to task successfully. And then I'm going to also give you some advice that is maybe the opposite advice from that. And I'm going to give you a third thing to try, which came from a podcast I listened to recently. So thing one, what we teach you to do in the program and what has worked for me is, I call it like collecting data on yourself. And what it means is just collecting observational, systematically observing your own self, your own writing, your own time to task. So for example, if you break a project into tasks and then you take one of the tasks and you basically, when you're collecting data on yourself, you're going to estimate the time it takes and then record the time it actually took. And you're going to do that for at least the 12 weeks of our Navigate program. And then you're going to start to get a sense of how long things take you. Now, I'm going to tell you when that works, what it looks like, and when it doesn't work, what it looks like. Okay. So personal example, when I was writing my book, Making Time to Write, I was, of course, practicing what I preach and project managing the heck out of my writing. And because I wasn't writing an academic book, so I just want to say a little caveat about this, because I do think it's a different thing to write what is essentially a self-help book, which is what my Making Time to Write book is. It is exactly like out of my brain. It is not an academically researched book or a book based on research, right? So it's a different animal. It's very much like this podcast, the book. If you like the podcast, you'll like the book. Anyway, what I needed to figure out was how long it was going to take me, because I needed to hit a publisher's deadline. So I started doing this. I started recording like, okay, I worked for this long and I wrote this many words. And again, for me, writing a word count was a good measure of progress. word count is not always a good measure of progress, and it's certainly not the only measure of progress, particularly for academic writing. So for example, or the example I always use is like figuring out the figures and what order you want to present them in is very important, at least as important, if not more important than word count for science writers, for example. Similarly, for ethnographers, like selecting the passages or quotes that you're going to use is something that doesn't you're not drastically increasing word count while you do that because you're kind of copy pasting, right? But is the thinking that is the core work of developing your ethnographic argument. So of course, that's just as important, if not more important than simple word count measures. However, for my book, simple word count was good enough. I had already created the structure. I knew exactly, everything was, I wrote a book overview and a book outline because I learned to write a book from Jane Jones. So you can go check out her stuff at upinconsulting.com. But anyway, so I just really needed to write the words. So I figured out how many words I wrote an hour when I was in my soaring state, when I was, things were everything. It wasn't like a sloggy day, So I was able to find that out. And then I just kept a tally. And then I was able to predict, okay, well, if I have this many hours scheduled on my calendar between now and the deadline, and I write this many words per hour, then I can meet the deadline or not, right? So by collecting data on myself and really figuring out how fast I wrote, I was able to be very predictable in turning in my manuscript. I notice I said how fast I write. Writing speed is something to think about, but not something to worry about. And it's not something to compare. I think that's another thing that's a really important part of this deciding time to task thing is I want you to just tread very carefully around ideas of speed, because usually we want to write faster than we do. We imagine that other people write faster than we do. So we're comparing, and usually our comparison isn't really based on anything real. For example, you might write just as fast as another person, but the other person has more writing time blocked on their calendar. And it's just simple math, it's just, and that doesn't mean that you're slow or fast. It means you have more commitments and can only spend this number of hours on writing every week. And that other person has fewer commitments and can spend more hours on writing every week. It actually doesn't have anything to do with speed. Okay. So having said all those things, so to sum, what I'm trying to say here is that one way of deciding time to task is to observe how long it takes you to do things and get a clear picture so that you can predict how long future writing tasks will take. Clear picture is the key. So if you find that every time you estimate, you think something's going to take you an hour and it takes you 3, that is just information. And it's better to be accurate with your estimates than to be fast. So the reason it's better to be accurate or predictable, I was going to say accurate with your estimates, which is what I just said, but why it's better to be predictable than fast, 2 main reasons, really important reasons. The first really important reason is developing that positive relationship with your writing so that instead of having a constant negative feedback loop, like I predicted, I failed, I predicted, I failed, you have a positive feedback loop. I predicted, hey, it came out about that much time. I predicted, I succeeded. I predicted, I succeeded. You have to engineer those winning moments with writing because it's so easy to fall into patterns of despair around our writing, especially when we're busy academics. Okay? The second really important reason that predictable is better than fast is so that you can be true to your word when you are making commitments to other people. Of course, you want to be true to your word when you're making commitments to yourself Okay, so if you are working with self-imposed deadlines, then you want to be the best you can at being true to yourself, right? Like setting a deadline that is realistic, a self-imposed deadline. Similarly, because so many academics are co-writers or co-authors, right? Like you write with other people for second author configurations or collaborations, right? You want to be very accurate, and you want to be one of the very few academics who does things in the timeline that they say they will. Because when you do that, and this is echoing messages of my friend and colleague, Kemi Dahl, when you do that, you are going to stand out in a big way. You will make yourself so stand outish. You will look like the most amazing, because you will be the most amazing. If when you say, I'm going to, I'll have it to you by this day, you do. Like just think about how normalized it is in academia for you to hear that from someone, and then you don't even really actually expect that they're going to come through. It's sad. Same with like academic publishing houses. They say, have it to me by this day. And there's people out there, no judgment, just facts. There's people out there with 5 years of extension on the original due date. So if you can become predictable, that is a much more valuable thing than fast. Like everybody's out there trying to be fast and failing. You could be predictable and succeed. All right. So when we're talking about deciding a time to task, way one to figure it out is to observe, right? Observe, collect data, and then make your future predictions based on past data instead of just based on guessing, right? Makes sense. It's a process. It is something that you try. It is something that you play with. Definitely take an attitude of play and experimentation, right? And you can get better. You can get better by basing your future predictions on your past results. Awesome. So I was listening to a podcast the other day that presented the opposite of that as an idea. And so I wanted to tell it to you so that you could play with it and see if maybe this would work. And it's something I'm going to start telling clients as well when they're worried about predicting time to task. I'll say that because it takes here's a couple of things that can throw off or make that method that I teach of like self-observation and predictions based on past results. That can kind of not work that well when you write lots of different genres of things. So that like how long it takes you to write paper in style X versus paper in style Y might be really different. The task list might be really different. And so that can cause you to feel like, wow, I'm just never nailing this. And it's because it's almost like a moving target, right? So that can be something just to like keep an eye out for. And then also like intellectual problems are not all the same, right? So sometimes as we're working through our thoughts in writing, it just takes longer than other times because of the complexity of the problem or because you're trying to work out a nuance, right? So you're not a robot. So you won't always be able to predict based on past results, like because you're not a robot. So I think that getting that, like collecting that data on yourself and observing and making better, more refined predictions is still worth it because you are probably making predictions based on no data and no results at all. Just like, as I say to my clients a lot of times, you're making predictions based on hopes and dreams. and because you think you're magical. And I think you're magical and amazing, but it's not the best. Hopes and dreams are not the best way to like go forward predictably. Anyway, having said all that, let me get to the thing that I heard on the podcast. So as I probably mentioned before on this podcast, I listen to lots of podcasts. And one of them that I enjoy is Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School. I think it's called the Life Coach School podcast. I've never participated in any of her programs. I just listen to her podcast, and I know a lot of people. I have been in programs with quite a few people who have been trained through the Life Coach School. So I just want to say that, like, I'm not, in case I say something wrong or somebody who's listening is familiar with the Life Coach School and they're like, that doesn't sound like Brooke. Just in case, that's the caveat, is that my knowledge of her is really through listening to her excellent podcasts and being coached by people who have been trained by her. All right. So I'm listening to this podcast and I don't even remember the name of it or what it was about. It was one of the last few podcasts that she's put out. And she was talking about something else entirely. And then she said, she was talking about the Parkinson's law and the Pareto principle, right? So I think the Pareto principle is that you get 80% of your results from 20% of the activities that you do, that 80-20 rule. And then Parkinson's law is that idea that tasks expand to the amount of time that you give them. So something I've always found to be true is that, for example, course prep for me, I could prep all day. I could prep so much. I love prepping. I would make beautiful handouts. I'd make my slides better. It would just expand into whatever amount of time I would let it. And so I had to really consciously corral my prep time so that it wouldn't be like 8 hours of prep for a 50-minute class that I've taught before, which is out of control. So that's that Parkinson's law idea. So what she was saying was when she's coaching her clients, she also gets this, not with writing, but with whatever they're trying to do, she gets this pushback like, well, I don't know how long it will take me to do that. And I was like, and my little radar went on because I'm like, oh yeah, I hear that all the time from people. I don't know how long these tasks take. I'm bad at estimating my time to task and all of that. And she was like, well, according to Parkinson's law, you have to decide how long you will give the task, which is why the title of this episode is Deciding Time to Task. That's the new idea I want to float out for you and see what you think. So what Brooke Castillo was saying was, like, you decide how long it's going to take. So if we were to apply this to writing your paper, instead of saying like, well, I hope that writing the introduction will take me 3 hours. I have 3 hours, 1 hour Monday, 1 Tuesday, 1 Friday for this. I put them on my calendar and then I will complete it, right? And then what happens usually when you don't decide, when you hope, okay? Big difference. I'm going to explain. So when you hope that that's how long it will take, you work on your 3 writing sessions gone by, you're not done. It didn't take 3 hours. It's going to take longer. And you just keep working on it. What Brooke Castillo was saying is, no, you decide that it's going to take 3 hours. And then you need to act like it's going to take 3 hours. What does that mean? That means you eliminate distractions while you're writing. You don't fiddle around with email every few sentences. You make sure that your writing sessions, I'm interpreting this, right? Like I'm saying what I think it means. Put your writing sessions during your soaring state. It means, like come to the writing sessions prepared and decide that I am going to spend 3 hours on this When the 3 hours it's over, I'm going to call it done. So this takes quite a bit of self-discipline. And it takes letting go of perfectionism, and it takes self-trust, right? That trust that your work will be good enough. The trust that you can produce an introduction in 3 hours, or I'm just making up this time frame. So like whatever you decide it is, that's the whole point. You decide. And you start to become true to your word with yourself. So important. Oh my goodness. Stop lying to yourself, right? So you say, no, this is how much it's going to take, and I'm going to do it. And you, instead of my method, right, which is quite passive, it's quite observational, it's quite like, and it's designed for people who have found lots of ways to self-criticize and who need a little grace. Brooke's way of deciding how long it will take takes more discipline. It takes more like, I don't know if I would say like chutzpah, like, hey, I have decided that this is what I'm going to do, and damn it, I'm going to do it. It takes that energy and that attitude. It takes knowing yourself quite well in terms of like when in the day you need to place a writing session, how long it needs to be, how you can like sit down and get to it. But I think it's a really interesting idea to play with. Like, what if you just decided? So what's the difference between deciding to do it and what you've been doing currently? I'm guessing, right? Like I know you think I personally know you because I'm talking to you through the earbuds, but I don't. But I do know kind of like the conglomerate you and what I see a lot from people coming into the program. The difference between deciding this introduction is going to take me 3 hours to write and what you've been doing so far is that what you've been doing so far, again, based on like what you hope. Like, I hope it's going to take me 3 hours to write, but I fully well expect it to take longer, and I'm going to let it flow over. So then what happens is maybe your writing sessions aren't as structured and focused as they need to be. Maybe you don't plan your writing sessions close enough together, and it takes a lot more like getting back into it. Like you're not setting yourself up with the attitude of deciding, right? You're setting yourself up with the attitude of hoping and wishing, but not deciding and expecting. So that's what I wanted to leave you with today. That's what I wanted to talk about was this kind of, it's almost like the opposite idea. It's not really an opposite, but it feels to me a little bit like the opposite idea of the observation, data gathering, and making predictions based on past results, which is my way that I teach inside of Navigate. It felt different, but worth exploring. And I thought, some of you are going to take this idea of deciding time to task and really run with it and like play with it because you are like ambitious and interested in seeing if it will work for you. So if it does, let me know. I would love to know how either one of these methods works for you if you try it. If you would like to learn more about writing and publishing your backlog of papers, if you would like to publish your low-hanging fruit paper in the 12 weeks of our Navigate program this summer, then please go ahead and get on the waitlist for Navigate. You can do that at scholarvoice.org/navigate. I can't wait to let you know. You can be the first one to apply for our summer session. All right. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.